Hello and welcome to Wrestling History Summarised with Lifting and Wrestling. If you enjoy this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff for more content like this. We all know Vince McMahon is head honcho, top boss man of the WWE. He took charge of the company in 1982 and developed it from just another territory in the wrestling game to pretty much the only galleon in the fleet until AEW rocked up. Most wrestling fans are aware that Vince McMahon inherited the then WWF from his dad, Vince McMahon Sr. However, fewer fans are aware of Vince Jr.'s granddad, Vince Sr.'s dad, Jess McMahon. So since we're breezing through the wacky mackies on this channel, that's where we'll start today. Born Roderick James McMahon in 1882, though he would later go by Jess McMahon, coincidentally he was born 100 years before his grandson would take control of the company. His parents were immigrants who had moved from Ireland to New York City. They were probably enticed by the United States' promise of religious freedom and land ownership, amongst other things. And they had 4 kids: Loretta, Catherine, Edward, and finally, Roderick. The kids all attended Manhattan College, with Roderick, who from now on I'll refer to as Jess for convenience, because that's the handle he went with, graduated with a commercial diploma when he was 17. When the father of the McMahons died, Jess and Edward took jobs as bank clerks in order to support their widowed mother and their sisters. However, the McMahon brothers, Jess and Edward, took more of an interest in sports than this route. Career-wise, they first pop up on the scene as managing partners of the Olympic Athletic Club and bookers at the Empire and St. Nicholas Athletic Club. The McMahons managed to make a name for themselves in the boxing scene by booking high-quality fights. However, public interest in boxing was dwindling, and the McMahons needed to expand their scope if they were to thrive. So they tried their hand at founding a baseball team. They founded the New York Lincoln Giants, an African-American baseball team that existed from 1911 to 1930. This was during the time that baseball was mostly segregated in the United States, and they found some success with the team. However, they had to sell in 1914 due to financial difficulties. They operated another team, the Lincoln Stars, for about 3 years, and whilst on tour they went to Havana in Cuba, where they got back into the fight promoting game. More to their roots. They co-promoted Jack Johnson's title defense against Jess Willard. After this, the McMahons, as McMahons do, had a bunch of different business ventures with varying successes. Jess McMahon sold furniture, they tried running a basketball team, they were running casinos where they promoted boxing fights, all good solid fun, managed to avoid the draft, which is always, because when they were about to be drafted, the war ended. Good for them. For about 2 years, their basketball team, the Commonwealth Big Five, was pretty dominant in basketball, but they didn't attract large crowds, so the McMahons eventually had to shut the team down. It was in 1915 that Jess McMahon had first started the journey that would eventually take over the world and became the first McMahon to promote pro wrestling. He started promoting shows at the Freeport Municipal Stadium in Long Island with his new ally, Carlos Luis Henriquez. Easy for me to say. Jess had clearly found a business he wanted to stay in. By the late 1930s, wrestling was dwindling in popularity. However, Jess stuck to the business. He also around that time was promoting boxing and began promoting at the 3rd Madison Square Garden, with the modern incarnation of the Garden still being considered a spiritual home for the McMahon's wrestling enterprise. Jess McMahon could only promote boxing events in this garden, however, as Tex Rickard despised wrestling and he would stop bookings in the garden. This was until Bernard McFadden, who was a former wrestler turned millionaire, gave Toots Mondt the funds to access the garden, where in 1948, the main event of the first wrestling show held in the garden for 9 years, Gorgeous George defeated Ernie Dusek. Toots Mondt took over the New York wrestling scene with Jess McMahon and other promoters at his side with his slam-bang Western-style wrestling. Finally, on January 7th, 1953, the CWC, that is Capital Wrestling Corporation, show was produced. Some sources claim it was Vincent J. McMahon who founded the company, others argue that it was Jess McMahon himself. However, it wasn't long after this that Jess McMahon passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage. He died at the hospital in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, allowing his second son Vincent J. McMahon to take over the business. Vincent J. would go on to rebrand the CWC as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, or WWWF. However, the rest of that story is for another McMahon in another video. Thanks for watching the Wrestling History Summarised. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, Lifting and Wrestling, and hit the like on the video to help us all do better as people. Our morality is pretty much contingent on the likes here, so there'll be more like this to come as wrestling history videos are interesting, but supporting the channel will support us. Thanks, see ya.